Welcome back, y'all. I know it's been a minute. I just want to first of all say welcome to becoming who I always said that I was. First of all, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is PatrickGregoryDaniels. Would love to know what your name is as well. Drop your name in the comments and say what's up. It's just my way to be respectful to who exactly you are. You know what I mean? I think sometimes in the internet space specifically, we have a tendency to not treat people like individuals. Sometimes we don't communicate and act the way that we actually do in real life. And that's something that I think I want to get in the habit of making sure I do on this channel. And part of the main reason I say that is because there's been a lot of times that I've met people that watch the channel in person, in real life. And for me, it kind of threw me off a little bit because, when you first meet somebody and you haven't seen them before in life, it's like I'm starting at 1 with you, but you might be starting at 10 with me because you've heard all the stories, you've, communicated in the comments and such. And so I just want to kind of make sure that I'm practicing, humanizing this YouTube experience. So if you will, drop your name in the comments, say what's up, introduce yourself, so on and so forth. I believe that there's this point in your life where you stop, chasing, trying to become who you are, and you simply just start being it. You know what I mean? And I think for me, that sometimes can have a harsh sting to it, if you will. It's like, well, I don't feel who I want to be already in my life. So, like, why wouldn't you continue to try to chase that? And I think oftentimes in your life, you don't really look at what you have. You don't really assess like where you are in the moment. And I think for myself, I looked around and I had my whole studio set up. I had everything that I wanted, all the gear that I wanted to play, and all of the tools that I wanted to express myself through. But I just didn't realize that, I was kind of already there. You know what I mean? Like, it was like the dream. I wasn't living the dream specifically so much so, but the rough framework was kind of like already in place. And that just, it really threw me off because it was like I was extremely specific about wanting to be able to have the ability to, make music every day. And so I looked up and I was like, man, like, I actually am living the dream. Like, everything that I wanted to be doing, like, I have the inner ability to do it, and I am doing it pretty much on my own terms. But I realized there were some things that I needed to find, tune. I mean, yeah, I want to be able to make music every day, and I would want to be able to spend time with my family and things of that nature. And yes, I can. But in order to do certain things, sometimes it's a financial strain. Sometimes I need a little bit of income, which will provide a little bit more freedom and peace of mind. So I wasn't specific about wanting to be able to create every day, but also being able to, earn a specific amount of money, be able to replace income in that type of way. So I feel like one thing that we maybe aren't doing a lot of times while we're, trying to chase the ideas, so to speak, is sometimes we're just really not being specific enough. I feel like we're not being specific enough, and we also need to go back and assess like the pieces that would make the dream really feel like the dream. And I also feel like in terms of like being it, we also gotta be it quietly sometimes, and we gotta be it consistently. And I want to say that every day, and the reason why is because like what I've noticed is quietly brings peace into your life and less distractions. And I also will say that consistency, consistency brings forth confidence. And I think a lot of people talk about, confidence. There's a lot of videos and films where people talk about that, and that's just a nature that we're talking about a lot of it today, but if you're consistent, and that's another thing, with consistency, I've learned that to me, consistency, everyone has a different definition for consistency. I feel like my definition of consistency might not be an equivalent to your type of consistency. With military background family members and a hardcore historically black college and university band training, very emblematical of a military regiment as well, and memorizing a lot of music, memorizing a lot of tunes, having a large repertoire of music memorized. I think my discipline, I won't say it's different, but it's specific to me, whereas someone that's a fitness person that's played sports all their life might have a different type of discipline, and different artists will have just different forms of discipline. So I really want to be clear when I talk about those elements, specifically consistency, because I say it oftentimes, but only you can define certain things in your life. I mean, I will say that people that have wisdom and people that have had some experience on the planet, in your specific area that you feel could be specifically called to being able to speak in your life, because not everybody is experienced or called to speak into your life specifically, but for those certain individuals that are, it's okay to learn from them. But I would say, like, nobody else can tell you that but yourself. Only you will know. Don't open up and take advice from somebody that doesn't feel like they're called to be able to speak into your life. But that in the peace, it can be really hard to quiet the noise sometimes and be silent and take in that peace. But in that silence, you get an opportunity to really become yourself, experience who you are, enjoy who you are, and I really think that once that consistency forms and you start to be able to pick up on your own patterns and things like that and understand what you're capable of, it's so beautiful how much joy you can have in looking back at your body of work, of creativity. It'll even cover up certain things that you're not excited about out in the in the real world, but it also will ground you and remind you about what fight in life is actually your fight. It'll keep you from fighting fights that aren't your fight. It'll make it so much easier for you to surrender things in the world that you might be fighting for, because they're not important to what you're called here on the earth to do, to bring forth whatever specific element of creativity it is that you were designed to make and bring forth to the earth. Consistency and peace will help you to not only enjoy those things, but continue to define those things for yourself. It's not always fun, but in a quiet and peaceful place, you get a chance and a time to really understand and enjoy, what you already understand and your new understandings. Yeah. Do the extraordinarily simple things. Very extraordinary. And the reason why I say that is because, for myself personally, it's governed in my faith. I'm personally a Christian. If you're not, that's cool. But even like Jesus clean feet, and what I learned from that when I'm aware of that story is that, if you got a janitorial position or you got any kind of position, like, do the thing that you do to the very best of your ability. Don't just do the things when you're on the performance stage well. And the reason why I say that is because, excuse me, y'all. The reason why I say that is because, it's really hard and tough to be turning the switch on and off. Keep the switch on. Do the things that you don't do so awesomely, or the things that you don't want to do very awesome. Live your life through the guise of what you are. Clean dishes like an artist. If you're an artist, clean dishes like an artist. Lace your shoes like an artist. Speak, think, drink, and talk like an artist. Because if you do those things in that type of way, it won't matter what you're doing, as you're getting started, or you just shift gears in between wherever you are in your life, but you'll still be being that instead of striving to be that. We're not chasing our dreams. We are embodying our dreams and then noticing in the process, on the way to actually fully manifesting that life, that we're in it. We're going to realize and notice that we're in it because we've already became that person through thought and through our approach and actual execution and performance of life. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so many people in life that you've studied, you've heard about, you've seen the interviews, you've read the books. You guys are geniuses. We are geniuses. You know what I'm saying? So let's be geniuses in all things. I'm not saying you need to know how to do everything, but what I am saying is at least approach everything that you approach in life as if you are the individual that you are when you're doing the favorite thing that you're most passionate about doing, which is what you are called to be doing and living in this moment that we're blessed to be living, called life, and excuse me, in the face of obstacles and even hatred, even, you want to be this individual, and y'all forgive me, I had a cold earlier, but I gotta let y'all know, when I say, like, even in the face of hatred, even, man, I just recently worked with someone that was just plagued by, to me, what seemed like jealousy and envy and just negativity, so much so to the point that this individual tried to create a narrative about myself that I was bullying someone that I tried to actually give just nice, formidable, instructional advice, showing that I cared about your future and that I don't want you to mistakenly become an accessory to a situation that you don't have anything to do with, just because you're unaware that maybe the company that you're keeping is doing bad things, are doing bad things. And man, I had a full-on investigation go on about me at my own job because I gave somebody advice. And the person said to the person that was telling the story about myself, that asked whether or not I was bullying them. Guys, I wouldn't even know how to bully somebody if somebody asked me what to do. Like, give me some ideas. I'd have to go look for it. But I'm only saying that to you guys and just giving you that brief kind of interlude about the situation, because in life, you have to, I don't want to say you have to, because I'll never tell you guys what to do. I just want to, articulate and encourage an embodiment of you, and for us to continue to be whom we know we're supposed to be, and to continue to stay inspired to be and do so and such to the best of our abilities. But this doesn't come without challenges, and it does not mean, like I said before, that you won't have to do these things in the midst of hatred and jealousy and so on and so forth. We got to do these things and should be able to do these things and should potentially be working the muscle of conviction to be, an artist in the face of someone that hasn't figured out what they want to be yet. And they'd rather just be kind of like, socializing, with you. But when you figure out exactly what it is you want to do, I won't say for some reason, but in this section of the film, I'm not going to describe why, to me, we often start to not want to be a part of low vibrational. I don't even want to call it low vibrational, but let's just say that, like, I love music and I love people, And I love all of the things in life that we have to pay attention to, get a chance to pay attention to, and to, digest with our intuitions and emotions and feelings, in order to be able to reflect in such a way that we're able to create ideas that help to make influential music to our own spirits and hearts. That expression of humanity is what I share in being able to express humanity through music for the human experience and the human just that the human texture, the human fiber, if you will. And so when I say those things, it's like, if it's kind of like I might come off as seeming like the individual that's like always serious about something like all the time, because I'm thinking about things and processing things and staying so much in the moment that like sometimes I'm not like goofing around or just having a very like comedic time in life. I'm not saying that the way I'm not is a bad thing, but I'm saying that the ways that I don't find myself often expressing myself or engaging with, the reason why I'm typically not that way is because, just like I can't remember the book, but or the reference, but it says that once you figure out what it is you want to be, the world becomes your oyster / library. So every experience that I'm going through in life, it's almost like I'm looking at it in the term of like music, in the term of writing music, in the term of feelings and sounds and things of that nature. So if something's going on a different vibration or a different frequency, which I'm not calling that low, I'm just calling that a different frequency. I'm not judging anybody else's frequency level. If somebody's not like me, I'm not saying that that's a low vibration. But what I'm saying is it is different. And I'm saying that being and living out exactly who you are and knowing who you are and not trying to become it, not chasing it, but just being it and experiencing it on that path and in that path is where I found myself disinterested in certain types of conversations. And when people that do converse on that certain type of conversational level converse around me, sometimes people can interpret your disinterest for their conversation through an oppressive lens. You can feel almost as if somebody just doesn't want you to be around them. They'll try to push you out of the environment and push you out of the culture with their unembracing energy. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to tell you like, yo, I don't want to be around you, or yo, you get on my nerves, or hey, like I'm not feeling this. I can just not embrace you as much. You know what I'm saying? Like I can not say, hey, it's good to see you. I could ignore you when you come in the building and all these different types of things. And even passive hatred is hatred. You know what I'm saying? If I pretend as though I don't see you, it's, you know what I'm saying? That's still a thing. And so what I'm trying my best to elaborate in this particular section of the film is that presence of being yourself and not chasing yourself to become, chasing yourself, but chasing to become, who you define as self for you, is something that you may also need to work up to being able to do that through the actual experience of feeling hatred from others. In the face of silence and in the face of distractions, I would also say to flee lust. You know what I'm saying? Like embrace silence and flee quickly when things try to steal your peace and your focus. And the reason why I say that is because, everywhere we look, everywhere on social media, there's lust trying to take our attention. It's everywhere. It's in the media, it's in a film. We're constantly being like it's almost like films and music of certain types are trying to like offend us into paying attention to them. You know what I'm saying? Like you listen to certain songs, and I mean pretty much pretty much every single artist, you know, in the world. It's normally like on a pop level, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to like state too many absolutes and, you know, things of that nature, but you know, you look up and somebody says something in a verse in a song, and they throw out a curse word real quick, you know, and to me, you know, curse words come across like exclamation marks. You know, when you write a paper, or you write, think about like emails. I'm sure you probably heard that like people say like, man, it felt like this person was yelling at me because they typed it in all caps, you know? And it's like, dude or lady, like chill, like just like relax. Cause you know, you're not going to say a couple of curse words and make me pay attention. You know, I think one of the best sayings I've ever heard in life was to don't yell louder, but improve your argument is how it goes. You hear me? I'll say that again. Don't talk louder. Don't yell louder. Just improve your argument. You know what I'm saying? And that's what happens a lot in life right now is, you know, lust tries to embrace it tries to embrace us with exclamatory content, you know, and you know, somebody tries to curse and they try to get us to pay attention. You know, you turn on like films and there's cursing in there, there's songs with cursing in there, and it's like, you know, trying to get you to pay attention to it. But just, you know what I'm saying, don't let that stuff steal your peace or your focus, because your peace and your focus, they're super duper important. You know what I'm saying? If you don't have peace, you know, you can't control when you're offended to things or by things, you know what I'm saying? Well, I guess I should say offended by things, you know what I'm saying? You can't be offended to things, but you know, that's just offensive. But these things that are offensive, you know what I'm saying, in nature, you know, from people, from the world, you know, from marketing or whatever it is, like you can't like reconcile those things without peace. And I think without constantly being you know, embracing content, film, whatever it is, you know, stuff that always has some offensive nature in it, you know, you can't have any calmness to your disposition, because these things are, you know, just trying to run your life with exclamatory, contentious behavior, so to speak, just in order to get your attention. And when those things are constantly a part of your life, you know, when you're trying to be who you are, and, you know, which to me is defined by further discovery, how can you have further discovery with constant distractions? And that's what the world we've gotten into feels like they can do in order to simply gain your attention. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, just think about like advertisements on certain television programming stations. The person or the programming that you're watching is going on and you're watching it, and then all of a sudden a commercial comes on and the volume is 10 decibels louder than the volume of the programming that you were watching. It can't be by mistake. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be a reason why things are that way, you know, and it's to shock you, it's to interrupt you. You know what I'm saying? And so as a part of humanity, like, I apologize that things are trying to offend you into distracting you and keeping you from paying attention and stealing your focus. All of those things in life have to be protected, you know what I'm saying, with your life, because your time and your silence and your energy contain your power and your creativity. That's what I've been learning lately. Becoming who I always said I was, without the noise, without the need for the permission of finances, just sound and peace. You know what I'm saying? Those things have been like an integral just feeling to what I've been going through lately. And it's like, I didn't even realize that I was waiting on the permission of finances to do certain things. You know, understand that a lot of people might not be in a situation where they can do certain things because, you know, finances have dictated otherwise, you know. But it's like, there's so many things that we can do with our sound as musicians. There's so many things that we can do with our peace, and confidence through our art without finances. And, for so long, I'll say that I just, sometimes I kind of wouldn't move because, I needed this, or sometimes wouldn't move because like I needed that. And I shouldn't have let it, kind of stop me and things of that nature. But I definitely have gotten past it, so I'm very happy that I've gotten past, certain things in my life. And, I've allowed other things to become what has catapulted me, I'd say, to different forms of currency and understandings of different types of currencies. I've just kind of just outworked all my peers in a way that, not thinking about competition or anything like that. I would just say that, like, I always found myself just trying to do a whole lot of work, because the way that I want to live my life is from an outward expression of my creativity. I want to provide for myself through an outward expression of creativity. And so, while coming out of like, sports and marching band and things of that nature, these are very competitive sports. So it took me a while to not, look at who I am as a sense of competition to like the whole outside world or even my peers. I found so much joy in the making of things that I found myself just pretty much wanting to make more things. And so it's been a really big joy in the term of becoming. There's a quiet power in realizing that you've already arrived, not because anyone said so, but because your daily actions resonate your truth. It would seem as though we have a certain amount of fans, or when you've been placed on the billboards, or if you can be an individual that says you've worked with Kendrick Lamar, Drake, or SZA or somebody, or recorded, produced certain people's tracks, that you've made it, you've arrived, you've been self-published, you've won a Grammy. But what I've learned so much and so often is that some of the people that, while some of the most successful, often a lot of them live very, very quiet lives. And I'm not casting any aspersions on, don't knock me for screwing that word up too much, but I'm not saying anything negative about anybody that lives a more loud, more, just outwardly visible life. But there's oftentimes people that don't live those types of lives, feeling as though, and I speak for myself, that because I haven't produced any super duper popular artists on tracks, that I could be led to believe that I haven't made it yet, or something of that nature. But it's like, bruh, you're making good work, you're doing it, you're living it daily. It's a lifestyle. Your choices are reflecting the heart of expression that you want to be making on a daily basis. That's, I don't know, it makes me think of like Knowledge and like Mad Lib, certain producers that, yeah, they got people on their tracks and everything's like that, your alchemists and your, just people that I'm not even able to name, people whose names we might not even know, that are making good work, putting out a lot of stuff, kind of like farm to table, serving it straight to the people. That's kind of the most important thing. I mean, of course, over time, a lot of people can have a consensus type of opinion about your work, and they could love your work and they could say things about your work, and say to you that you make so much work and all of these types of things. But at the end of the day, if nobody can see what you're doing, are your daily actions reflecting, what it is that you are? You know what I'm saying? Because we're not talking about chasing the idea of anything. We're talking about our actions echoing and being a reflection across, days and rhythms and unique blends of consistency in a way that where our efforts are allowing us to hear a sound, that inevitably is ourselves. We're creating love by being love. So therefore you are love, and the life that you're experiencing is the outward expression of love, not because someone turned around and said, I love you, or I love you too. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I'm just kind of really, I'm enjoying this like outward expression and reflective embodiment of what it means to realize that we are, who we are, we always said we were, like there's no anything that can qualify the label of what your daily actions have decided, that as an artist, that your artistry actually defines you to be. Rhythm, it's a language that the body speaks when words can't seem to keep up. We somehow can not how can I say it? Certain things just don't make sense. You know what I'm saying? There's certain producers that have made music that when we hear it, it actually will surprise the drummers. The drummers are like, yo, like what is going on? Like this doesn't make sense. There's rhythms that just move the body in an unexplainable way, and I feel like, discipline also, like it isn't pressure. It's really a pulse of freedom, so to speak, It's like how I often say that like consistency is, you listen to these people say, 10,000 hours, right? But the thing is what we don't talk about, what I'm not knowledgeable of that people talk about that often, is that everybody attains their 10,000 hours in a different type of way. You might have got your 10,000 hours on the skateboard when you were in elementary school. I might have got my 10,000 hours with social groups because it's more fun for me to skate with my buddies than it is for me to hammer tricks, by myself, trying to just get real good. Like how I was talking about, I used to perceive certain things in life through the guise of competition so much. But I mean, like I said, that discipline, whatever way your discipline is designed to show its outward expression, it's different. And I don't feel that discipline or consistency are actually the embodiment of an outward expression of pressure. You know what I'm saying? While some people do arrive and achieve, their outward expression from a means of pressure, I most certainly did in certain types of ways. When you got a coach, yelling at you, blowing whistles at you, and you got a drum major telling you to get back on the line, you know what I'm saying? Or a band director telling y'all to do it over again. That didn't cut it. That wasn't right. Y'all played that song and I couldn't feel nothing. You know what I mean? Make me feel it. You know what I'm saying? Don't play notes at me. Make me feel the music. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes the pressure does convert to a sense of feeling and expression similar to what I described in how rhythm can sometimes be understood through the body when the mouth and the language are confounded and they can't speak. There's so many people that will try to express something to you and they'll tell you like, yo, like I don't even have words for this. You know what I'm saying? Like, just like how people define love. People so often define love excuse me, let me rewind. People so often can't define love, and so they define their love by saying the actual word. But you know, I think people often describe love as what, you know, in this minute moment of time that I'm able to recollect my experiences with the, you know, just the world and its expression for love. You know, love is an ice cream on Sunday. You know, love is, you know, some people say love is like washing all the dishes. You know what I mean? Love is, you know, we've got people that have written books on the 5 love languages because people speak it in so many different ways, you know. I think that, you know, just that steady reminder that movement itself it's a medicine. It's a kind of healing, you know. I think there's a phrase that I started saying maybe 3 to 5 years ago, and that is that one can't dance if you're in a bad mood. Have you ever noticed that? You cannot dance if you're in a bad mood. They just do not mix, you know. And so that same movement itself is a healing, you know what I mean? Like, just, man, just move, you know. And also, like, I would say that flow, it doesn't come from control, which is crazy because I literally just saw a reel like the other day where I think it was like DJ Academics was kind of like clowning on Soulja Boy, and they cut the clip real short, whoever put the reel out, so I'm unaware of the entire context of the interview, but he said that somebody stole his flow, you know. And then like DJ Academics asked him, he was like, didn't you steal that flow from somebody else? And then, you know, the clip kind of like cut and it was like silent, but we'll never know how much context there was to that film or that conversation because I kind of don't really watch that stuff like too much. But, you know, if we think about things from the perspective of somebody like stealing your flow or stealing your style or stealing your whatever it is, at the end of the day, we're just conceiving things from a perspective of control. You know what I mean? And all of us feed off of everyone. You know, we all are. I would say that, like, whether you're inspired or uninspired, both are still a form of inspiration. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think one of my most influential inspirations growing up would definitely have to be gospel music. You know what I'm saying? But like, I think when I was fighting really hard to try to listen to secular music, I think I saw relative attributes and characteristic feelings from church in the music of Outkast, you know. So that's why I've never been like a super duper huge fan of like, I mean, I've never really been a fan of West Coast music, and I've never been a fan of like East Coast music, but I've always been just like there's like certain sonic textures from the Dungeon Family Outkast like catalog that to me, you know, I almost like wish I could make I wish like my whole library sounded like, excuse me, I wish my whole like genetic sonic texture was like a mixture of like Spodiote Dopalicious and Liberation, you know. Like those two songs have got to be like my most favorite songs in like life, you know, because they embody everything, you know, in my flow that I've, you know, put together from all of my inspirations and my uninspirations. You know what I'm saying? They got funk in there, they got gospel in there, they've got, horns in there. There's just, but I would say that like that's not a thing that like I'm trying to control. That's not a thing that I believe will be a sense of place where I don't practice like a surrender of like acceptance. I realize that makes me feel like really good when I hear those things. And so I've surrendered and accepted that these types of flows are the ones that inspire me the most. Therefore, that's what I find myself in the hypothetical weight room of being myself. I tend to pump more reps of creating liberation, spodioidopalicious type things because I surrendered to that acceptance. And I think that while we're still like discovering and going deeper and deeper, there's already like the you and the flow that's who you are. It's like it's so much already there. Don't let yourself ever believe for one moment that like you need to do a whole bunch of this or you need to do a whole bunch of that in order to become like who you are. You know what I'm saying? Or like, just remember that like every single heartbeat is like a rehearsal of faith. Every breath is a simplified practice of experiential manifestation. Like you're literally being and becoming, but you simultaneously still just are. Return is this art of remembering like exactly who you are before the noise. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember, and it's like it's kind of crazy because my intention is never to like call somebody out like directly or anything like that. I don't ever want to be disrespectful to anybody or make it seem as though like somebody didn't play an active role in me like experiencing like the best of myself. Because similar to the way that I said that being uninspired and being inspired are both forms of inspiration, we both have people that send us in directions that at the end of it all, we might feel like, like I didn't need to go that direction. Like I was already, at home with where I needed to be, before they set me down that road. You know what I'm saying? But like one of the most influential mentors that I had in my life of like beginning to learn production was one of my play uncles, Jabari. And I remember like I would make these tracks and he would like recommend that like I quantize certain elements. And later on I would say in what maybe you could call like I don't know, we don't quantify these periods of time and call ourselves like a sophomore producer or anything like that. But I would say like in my like sophomore year of like producing, Jabari like recommended that I would like quantize certain things. And so I would say like further into my like, I would say maybe call it like my senior year of like undergraduate music production, I realized like the only thing that I wanted to do was make unquantized music. I just wanted to record with the drums, with the microphones, you know what I'm saying? Like only playing to a click track, but not, you know what I'm saying? Like getting my entry musical notes snapped to a grid per se. And so later on, like in that like junior year of my production path, I kind of felt like, dang man, like JB was like making me quantize everything, or not making me quantize, but suggesting that I quantize everything. But what I began to realize when I like became wise enough to really understand the path that, God allowed him to encourage me to take, was that it's really easy to delineate, if you will, or divert, away from origin. You know what I mean? I'm thinking about like patterns, you know what I'm saying? Because when sometimes certain patterns come out, there's certain programs that you can observe or look into that will show you like how much delineation there is, or how much digression there is away from, where something quote unquote should be, supposed to be, or like where you would imagine that it would be, right? And so later on, just becoming more experienced, I realized that it's really, really easy to find out how much you're slowing down time, by grooving the beat more, or speeding up the beat and getting quicker and getting closer to the beat. It's easier to groove something out and stretch it out and actually get closer to it more quickly if you actually have a accurate representation, a connotation, an understanding for where the beat actually, where home is on the beat. If you can know where something is perfectly quantized, then it's easy for you to go off beat and then get back on beat, and then go off beat and then get back on beat. And it took me a long time to really appreciate, what it was that he either intentionally or unintentionally was trying to provide for me as knowledge. So, I would say, even though, like I'm saying, like in this moment of time, to understand that like returning is the art of like remembering who you are, like before the noise. I would say also like be really careful to what you are allowing yourself to call noise, because that one thing you might call noise might be the awareness or the presence of distortion, which is like a secret tool for making subwoofers and kicks hit a little harder in the mix. You know what I'm saying? So don't be too quick to like be judgmental of things or label things, or play the other side of the card, just to see how both sides actually make a card. So, and I mean, like I was saying before, and then even you drift off tempo, the rhythm still awaits for you. It forgives quickly. It always leaves the door open. You know what I'm saying? Like, grace lives in the repetition. That's where the pattern is. That's where the beat is, in the repetition, and then every restart, it sharpens the soul, and I would say that it definitely resharpens the soul if you can have grace for the moments that you turn off the main street and go in different directions. You know what I'm saying? I tell people all the time, I say, hey, it's interesting when we go off the wrong road, you know what I'm saying, and we go do things that take us further away from where we think we should be. But I think what a lot of people often forget to communicate, that I try to make sure that I communicate about, is that if you go off the other road, you know what I'm saying, in your life, doing something, you know what I'm saying, and getting away from, where you quote unquote want to be or think you should be, sometimes we forget to talk about the time that it takes to come back down the road. You know what I mean? Like, you don't go down the wrong road, and then all of a sudden when you realize that that's not the right road, you don't just wake up and you're back where you wish you never left off. Things have changed. Sometimes people have moved on. Sometimes things aren't what you thought they were when you come back to them. But at the same rate, when you're coming back down that side street trying to make it back to that main road, you also come back to that main road with all the growth from the experiences that you experienced off, as you digressed. You know what I'm saying? And I hate to call it digression, because as long as you're traveling and making movement, you're still like a part of the point. You're still like staying on topic. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, we are the sum of all of our smaller elements. All the smaller elements are as valuable in making a huge piece to the whole. They might not be the equivalent, but shift one thing and you inevitably have a different conclusive end. And then you have patience. You know what I'm saying? Like, Patience is rhythm when it's stretched thin. And until it becomes understanding, timing is born in the silence between effort and release. I think stillness like teaches you where the downbeat really lives. And delay, it doesn't mean denial. It means preparation. The groove needs breath to exist. And that's something that I try my best to do in different drum beats and different patterns. I'm starting to think to myself about a couple of different experiments that I want to undergo. You know, I'm thinking about just kind of looking at rhythm, you know, by itself, like if it were a solo, you know, because I've noticed that, you know, a lot of the beats I do end up being like a boom bap beat, but you know, maybe people don't always look at boom bap beats like beats that are done on live drums. Repetition is also this thing that I've been examining as of lately. You know, it seems as though it's proof that devotion can live within our ordinary motions. You know, it's like, it's so perplexing because it almost seems as though it's like disguised as movement. You know, it's almost like each hit, each take, each day, it's like a small prayer for mastery in our art form or our craft that you know, it's artistic movement. I find that the consistency is the quiet form of devotion. You know, familiarity becomes freedom. You know, the more we do it, the different ways we do it, the more that we start to kind of decode these things, these patterns that we didn't really know were there. And we start to discover, you know, style. We start to discover inherent possibilities. We start to discover ways to even go deeper in the direction of our understanding of ourselves, and our expression becomes even more eloquent. Our vocabulary, it becomes more elaborate. We find just different explorations and different ways that we want to try to practice, even looking for new discoveries, you know, different experiments, you know, just different ways to expand and enhance our imaginations, you know, just through repetition and paying attention and decoding our own movements through the process. One of my favorites is flow. You know, what's so beautiful about flow to me is it's what happens when discipline just finally exhales. You know what I mean? All of those things you put together for the good, all of those things that you solidified, all of that time, all of those experiments and everything like that, when you just let everything go, you know, that's obviously where you have flow, but it's also where, you know, things like muscle memory kick into place. You know what I'm saying? Like when it all locks in, discipline turns into joy, you know. And it's really interesting because something that I discovered just, you know, as of recent, it was something that I heard that you know, it's not like a cliche that I've often heard said, but it's that the body remembers what the mind forgets, you know. And I was like, man, like like where did that come from? You know, that's really cool. But I think one thing we gotta allow ourselves to do is we gotta allow ourselves to forget. We gotta allow that freedom to really kick in. And you know, every groove is a conversation with peace. You know, alignment isn't about waiting for your life to catch up. It's about trusting your movement before the proof shows up. I used to think I needed everything to line up first: money, timing, the right setup. But life doesn't wait for perfect conditions. You move first, then things align. That's when the sound starts feeling alive again, you know? It's like chaos can still carry direction. The melody finds you once you stop forcing it. And I'm glad that I started to, move with what I have, do with what I have in the moment in order to solidify the present, in order to actually be able to, just start imagining a future and creativity, because the more you dig with the tools you currently have, the more that the experimentation that you want to try in the future expands your imagination. It's like the more that I dig, the bigger my eyes get in terms of the opportunities. The more I start to realize that which I have right in front of me is it's quite unique, and on a spiritual note, everything you have in the moment, like somebody else is praying for it. You know what I mean? So I think that sense of alignment, it's interesting that, in order to kind of align things, it would somehow feel that things are somehow like already unaligned. And I think that could potentially be the furthest thing from the truth, There's maybe not that much that you need to like put on track in order to be where you want to be, It could potentially more so be more of the idea of just, shifting, what you already have working for you in your favor. And even the things that aren't working for you in your favor, like I said before, chaos can still carry some sense of direction. It reminds me of one of my older albums that at the time I wasn't playing like piano or any kind of like chordal instruments. I was pretty much playing nothing but like horns and drums and things of that nature. And when I was doing so, somebody else came into my life again and kind of let me know that like, in order to solidify, that notation and those movements and those melodies that you're doing, you might want to add some piano in there to kind of lock it all into place and everything. But it kind of gave me a foundational sound that didn't have that sense of chaos. And when I look back at some of those recordings, that sense of chaos that those songs had by not feeling like they were like grounded to, the piano, it had this very interesting like Fela Kuti type of sound, because a lot of times you might not hear like piano, you'll hear like drums and guitars and all these different like horn line melodies or counter melodies. And so it just seems like there's like these floating hits in the music. And when you solidify those things with chords and pianos with long sustain, it starts to feel like, the music is kind of very, just very stabilized, very sustained, very like grounded. You can almost like predict where you're about to go in a sort of way. And I think in that period of time in my life, I did learn that like, hey, this piano thing is great, but I think, like I said before, early in the video, that like newfound knowledge that sends you down another road, as it kind of like adds to your arsenal and things of that nature, it also can kind of like take you away from things that are also still good, and it expands you in such a way. So yeah, the more I think about it, it's kind of interesting, like there's so many things out there about like melody, and melody is one of those things that, it kind of tends to find you, the more you stop forcing it, like it reminds me of something that kind of like peeks his head out, in between all of those things that are going on. It's almost like finding the melody reminds me of like bird watching. You could you can move one time and the bird's gone, or you could just not be that that present or that aware and miss the whole thing, But, surrender, you know what I'm saying? Like, creation, it's not built, creation's not built on control, you know what I'm saying? It's born from trust, which definitely comes out of pattern and repetition and things of that nature. But, the keys respond to like the emotion more than they respond to like the precision, there are those glissandos of different types of sounds that, they're more, emotive and more like, revealed once we're more yielding, when we become more submissive to, the process of what's going on, with those keys. Sometimes the most honest chords just come from mistakes, and I'm not that, I don't hammer in the key signatures like that. I just kind of play, what feels good and what sounds right to me. So I don't really place the word mistakes in my vocabulary. I've got like Thelonious Monk records and stuff like that. So, not to say that he plays perfect or plays terrible, but we do know he plays with a lot of dissonance, and the things that, he plays could be seen as not, beautifully appropriate. It definitely makes you think. So, but that's a topic for another day. Perfection blocks presence. It reminds me of how, when I'm recording, I oftentimes like I try to keep the most honest take when I'm recording. I don't try to like keep the perfect take, I'm not trying to record in a very, mainstream kind of way, not to say that they're not doing some of the things that I'm talking about, but, sometimes it's easy to like just mix the life out of, the recording, so, let the instrument, teach you how to breathe, I would say like let the instrument teach you how to breathe, because I think that, relating with the instruments and listen to what the instruments want, that could like totally be like, and it is a thing. I also try to like make sure I'm kind of like hearing my voice too, I don't try to impose my voice on the things that I play, but I do believe that, there's a sense of surrender where you're also still being like transparent as well, and I really try to be big on those types of things, man, because it feels true. And I think no matter what portion, we're looking at in this film, honesty and transparency are like paramount. I have a few notes for you guys and gals about motion here. Motion is movement, and it invites meaning. The act of showing up opens doors that waiting never will. Momentum is a quiet kind of a prayer. Progress often sounds like repetition until it becomes revelation. And I used to overwork myself like crazy, you know what I'm saying? I used to listen to all of the motivational speeches and, important people in the world that you all have heard. You've heard the speeches by Kobe and the speeches of just everyone, about outworking people and things of that nature. And I definitely did those things and still do those things. I mean, for God's sakes, you guys are watching the film right now. If you made it to this point, it's like, I haven't finished it yet, obviously, but man, this thing is like long. And the reason why is because like I want to contribute on a large scale, because I want to learn as much as possible, and the things that I learn, I want to also give from that same space, and it's like it's like, man, like that's a lot. Like you're doing a lot. You're doing the most, you know. But like I said before, you know, movement invites meaning. And so the more that you do, the more that you dig down, the more that you, because it's at the end of the day, it's still going to be work. You know what I'm saying? But like, while you're doing this work, think about like this work versus all the other kind of work that society could deem as work. I feel like there's always going to be a work that you'd rather be doing. You know what I mean? And it's the work that you'd rather be doing always has rewards that you would rather receive, you know? Like, I feel like, you know, there's been plenty of stories about people receiving like their first $10 from their first album, or like selling their first book, or selling their first whatever it is, you know? Like, what's the first thing that you sold, you know? And even when you didn't do a whole lot of it, you know, it's still like, man, like, wow, like, appreciate the fact that they appreciate like what I'm doing. I remember when I first received like my very first like what do they call it? Like, I forget what YouTube calls it, but it's like, you know, when somebody like, I don't know, like donates some money in the comment section or something like that. That happened to me, you know, maybe like a year ago for like the first time. Like somebody gave like, I don't know, $10 or $5 just from the film, like, and told me that they really needed that and needed to hear what it was. And you know, I remember when like the channel became like approved to be able to like receive those types of contributions, and I was just like, wow, like, you know, I remember being at work that day and I was thinking to myself like, man, like somebody appreciated the thoughts that I tried to contribute in the areas of creativity. Man, this is beautiful. You know, of course I thought about like, oh man, will this happen again? But future tense in those things don't necessarily matter as much as, you know, putting the movement, you know, like movement invites meaning, and people feel and resonate with that meaning. And it was a great feeling, and I know other people have felt that feeling also. There's also balance. Peace and ambition can share the same room. I just realized that for peace and ambition, they kind of just sit on different frequencies, you know what I'm saying? I'm learning that peace can like, it's interesting, man, because like I'm thinking like, yo, like peace can obviously like coexist with drive, you know? A lot of times there's that push and there's that forward momentum to drive, but at the same time, like when it starts to be perceived as work, it's like something is not necessarily going, you know, the way that you might want it to go, the way you might want to perform, you know, because we drive and we set up, you know, the format, the formula, the way that things should go. But then inside of those things, we should also breathe life, emotion, and feeling into it. And so I think that's where the peace comes from. It's like, yo, we got fuel in the car, we got gasoline in the car, diesel, whatever, right? But then like the car also has like style too. So, you know, you put that style on it and you put that comfort in there, you put that music in there, and now you're having an experience, but you're actually driving, you know what I mean? And it's like, focus isn't necessarily loud, you know, it's clarity, you know, it's like they're different things, but they still feel the same. It's like knowing why you're here, you know, stillness doesn't mean stagnation, and direction is louder than speed. You know, it's like, I think with that, it reminds me, I was reading, I think it's, I can't remember if it was like How to Grow Rich or something like that. It was, I think, this Napoleon Hill book I have. It might be near me now, but the book, I got to the portion of the book, like just right in the front of the book, because this one thing that it talks about initially is like the definiteness of purpose. And without definiteness of purpose, it's kind of like hard to do anything, you know. Definiteness of purpose is like, it's like, having a direction to aim something. If you got good direction, it kind of doesn't matter what you're aiming or what you're pointing in whatever direction, because you've got purpose. You know what I mean? Like, that's why we look up and we see so many people that can jump from different occupations and still be like a force to be reckoned with, and as much as there's force, like forces also like could be moved by peace, so people can jump back and forth between music industry and acting and I can't remember the Asian guy that was a dentist, but he's also an actor. People that can fulfill definiteness of purpose and direction, you can be successful at anything. And fulfilling the definition of self is the true definition of success. I hate to throw that word in there really quickly like that and not necessarily give contextual clarity behind what I'm defining success to be, because I don't want anybody to feel like some particular goal or some particular ranking is what I'm defining that as, if you will. Presence. Every breath matters before every note is ever played, and I'm sure you've heard it before. If not, listen to music and think about all the space between the notes that you hear. Imagine how the silence creates the music as well. That silence that we speak of, that we defined as silence, is oftentimes the feeling, the camaraderie. It's the relationship of presence. When there's nothing there, there's still something happening. Just like saying no is as much as a decision as saying yes. Making a choice is as much of a choice as making no choice. You decide not to make a choice, and you've also made a choice to make no choice. That pause, that inhale, that's life entering through the music. Creation begins with listening, and the horn only amplifies what the heart already knows. Gratitude. Every time I sit down to create, I really want to practice reminding myself that this is a dream and it's already happening. Becoming isn't a moment. It's a rhythm that you return to daily. You know what I mean? Like you got a goal, you're reaching and you're striving. You're trying to, just really, like I've said before, you're trying to embody this whole, just lifestyle, if you will. You don't want to seek this person when you're like creating it from within. You know what I'm saying? Like, so this is me showing up, becoming what I always said I was, not through words, but through work. Identity is like, identity is concealed, but it's also created through action. Consistency is the truest confession. Offering. If you're watching this, I hope something here reminds you of your own rhythm. The version of you that creates without fear. Art is it's like this mirror that shows us we're still alive. Sharing is another form of healing. And then there's closure. I want to send peace and, just have a great everything, everybody, you know.